Single dad inherited a storage unit, opened it months later, and found someone had been living inside. But when he saw the tiny bed, the crayon drawings, and a photo that said, "Mommy says you're my daddy," he realized this wasn't a break-in. This was the beginning of a miracle that would change his life forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Jack Harmon shifted uncomfortably in the hard wooden chair of the law office. The air conditioning hummed too loudly, and the leather briefcase of the attorney, Mr. Peterson, creaked as he pulled out various documents. The small office smelled of old coffee and dusty law books that lined the walls. "Now then, Mr. Harmon." "Mr.?" Peterson adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "As the sole remaining next of kin to Roy Harmon, there are some matters we need to discuss." He shuffled through the papers with practiced efficiency. Jack ran a calloused hand through his graying hair. He hadn't seen Uncle Roy in, 15 years? The last time was at Jack's wedding to Sarah, before everything fell apart. Uncle Roy had been a quiet presence at the reception, nursing a single glass of champagne in the corner. "I wasn't even aware he'd passed," Jack said softly, guilt creeping into his voice. The morning call from the lawyer's office had been unexpected, pulling him away from a bathroom remodel job he desperately needed to finish. Mr. Peterson nodded sympathetically. "Yes, well, your uncle was a rather private person in his later years." He pulled out a single sheet of paper. "The will is quite straightforward, Mr. Harmon. Your uncle left you the contents of a storage unit at the Safe and Sound storage facility on Morton Street." Jack blinked. "A storage unit? That's it?" "I'm afraid so, though I should mention, Mr." Peterson's expression grew slightly concerned. "The unit hasn't been paid for in 3 months. If you want to claim the contents, you'll need to settle the outstanding balance of $285. Jack's stomach tightened. That amount would put a serious dent in this month's grocery budget. He was already stretching every dollar, trying to keep up with Ellie's growing needs and the endless stream of house repairs. "And if I don't claim it, the contents will be auctioned off to cover the debt, as per the facility's policy." Jack rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. The last thing he needed was another financial burden, but something about abandoning Uncle Roy's belongings didn't sit right with him. The man had been his father's only brother, and despite the distance between them in recent years, Jack remembered the quiet summers spent at Roy's farm when he was a boy. "I'll take care of it," Jack said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. The drive to the storage facility took him through a part of town he rarely visited anymore. The streets were lined with discount furniture stores and pawn shops, their windows plastered with faded sale signs. Safe and Sound Storage was a sprawling complex of orange metal buildings, their paint peeling under the afternoon sun. The office was barely bigger than a closet, with a desk fan fighting a losing battle against the heat. A middle-aged woman with frizzy red hair looked up from her magazine as Jack entered. "Can I help you?" Jack explained his situation, handed over his credit card for the past due amount, and tried not to wince as she swiped it through the machine. She gave him a key attached to a plastic tag marked Unit 247 and pointed him in the right direction. Unit 247 was at the far end of the complex. Jack's work boots kicked up dust as he walked down the narrow alley between storage units. The sound of traffic from the nearby highway created a constant background hum. The padlock was rusted, and it took several attempts before the key turned. The metal door protested as Jack pulled it upward, and a musty smell wafted out. He stepped back, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness inside. The unit was packed with furniture draped in old sheets, boxes stacked to the ceiling, and what looked like farming equipment pushed against the back wall. Jack's heart sank. This would take days to sort through, time he couldn't afford to spare. He spent an hour there, moving boxes around, trying to get a sense of what he'd inherited. Most of the boxes were labeled in Uncle Roy's neat handwriting. Kitchen, books, photos, nothing looked particularly valuable, just the accumulated possessions of a long life. By the time Jack got home, his back ached and his clothes were covered in dust. The small house he shared with Ellie was quiet except for the sound of music drifting down from her room. He heated up some leftover casserole and called her down to dinner. Ellie appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, paint smudges on her t-shirt from her latest art project. "You're late," she said, dropping into her chair. "I thought you had the Thompson job today." Something came up. Jack served them both portions of the casserole, which looked even less appetizing reheated. "Remember Uncle Roy? Mom's wedding pictures guy? The farmer?" Ellie stabbed at a piece of broccoli with her fork. "Yeah." Jack sat down heavily, He passed away. Found out today at the lawyer's office. Ellie's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, I'm sorry, Dad. Jack shrugged, trying to keep his tone light. He left me a storage unit, spent the afternoon checking it out. A storage unit? Ellie's eyebrows rose. Like on those TV shows? Maybe it's full of treasure or something. Her voice carried that edge of sarcasm she'd developed lately, the one that reminded him so much of her mother. I wouldn't count on it, Jack said, managing a small smile. Looks more like old furniture and farming stuff. Probably take me weeks to sort through it all. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the scrape of forks against plates. Jack watched his daughter, wondering if he should say more about Uncle Roy, about the memories of those childhood summers. But the words wouldn't come, just like so many other things he wanted to tell her these days. Instead, he asked about her art project, and the moment passed, like so many others, in the quiet of their modest home. The late August sun beat down mercilessly as Jack's old pickup truck rattled into the Valley Storage Facility's cracked parking lot. Weeds pushed through the asphalt, and a faded sign creaked in the hot breeze. He'd been putting this off for 2 weeks, but the bright pink late notice that had arrived in yesterday's mail finally forced his hand. Jack pulled the truck to a stop and checked the unit number again, 23B. His uncle's handwriting on the original paperwork had been so messy, he'd had to double-check it 3 times. The whole place looked deserted, except for a rusty station wagon parked near the office. Inside the small office, a desk fan pushed around the warm air. The manager, a heavy-set man named Carl, according to his name tag, barely looked up from his newspaper. Unit 23B, Jack said, placing the late notice on the counter. I inherited it from my uncle. Roy Harmon? Carl's chair squeaked as he turned to his computer. 3 months behind. That's... He typed something, squinting at the screen. $240. Jack's stomach tightened. He hadn't expected it to be that much. Any chance of a discount? Since I just inherited it? Policy's policy. Carl shrugged, still not making eye contact. Pay it now, or we auction it off next week. With a sigh, Jack pulled out his wallet. The payment would eat into this month's grocery budget, but he couldn't risk losing whatever was in there. Maybe there'd be something worth selling. He handed over his debit card, trying not to think about the dwindling balance in his account. Carl processed the payment and handed him a receipt along with a new padlock. Units down, that way. He pointed through the window. Make a right at the end. Can't miss it. The gravel crunched under Jack's work boots as he made his way down the rows of storage units. Most looked well maintained, but as he turned the corner, the conditions deteriorated. Unit 23B was near the back, where the fence separated the facility from an overgrown vacant lot. Standing before the unit, Jack felt a mix of curiosity and dread. The orange door was spotted with rust, and spiderwebs decorated the corners. The old padlock hung open. Someone had already cut it. Great. He pulled it off and let it drop to the ground. Here goes nothing, he muttered, gripping the handle at the bottom of the door. It resisted at first, stiff from disuse. Jack had to put his back into it, muscles straining as he forced the door upward. It shrieked in protest, sending a small shower of rust flakes down on his shoulders. The smell hit him first, musty and stale, with an underlying scent he couldn't quite place. As his eyes adjusted to the dimness, Jack reached for his phone and switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a space about 10 feet deep by 10 feet wide. At first glance, it looked like typical storage unit clutter. Old furniture covered in dust, cardboard boxes with water damage, and what might have been a bicycle frame leaning against the wall. But as Jack stepped inside, his light caught something out of place. In the back corner, a makeshift bed had been created from flattened cardboard boxes and several blankets. They were arranged carefully, one folded as a pillow. Next to the blankets, someone had stuck children's drawings on the wall with masking tape. The pictures were done in crayon, stick figures holding hands, a house with a red roof, a rainbow arching over mountains. Jack's throat tightened as he moved closer. A small stuffed rabbit, gray with age and missing one eye, sat propped against the wall. Next to it was a purple backpack, the kind elementary school kids used. It was unzipped, and he could see a few pieces of clothing tucked inside. He stood there, flashlight beam playing over the scene, his heart heavy. Someone had been living here, someone with a child. The thought made his hand shake slightly. He'd worked with enough charitable organizations through his church to recognize the signs of homelessness. The food wrappers had been neatly collected in a plastic grocery bag. Whoever had stayed here had tried to keep the space tidy. An empty water bottle sat next to the blankets, along with a small battery-powered reading light. Everything spoke of careful organization, of trying to create some semblance of home in this metal box. Jack picked up one of the drawings that had fallen to the floor. It showed 3 figures, a tall one and 2 smaller ones, all holding hands. Above them, in wobbly letters, someone had written, "My family." The paper felt fragile in his hands, and he carefully placed it back where he'd found it. The reality of what he was looking at sank in slowly. While he'd been putting off dealing with this inheritance, this space had been someone's shelter. His chest ached at the thought of a child sleeping here, drawing pictures to brighten the metal walls, trying to make the best of it. The bright pink late notice suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his pocket. Had his delay in handling this forced them to leave? Where were they now? The questions tumbled through his mind as he stood in the quiet unit, surrounded by evidence of lives he knew nothing about. A car door slammed somewhere in the facility, making Jack jump. He realized he'd been standing there for several minutes, lost in thought. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows through the unit's entrance. He needed to start cataloging what was actually here, his uncle's belongings, whatever they might be, but he couldn't bring himself to disturb the careful arrangement in the corner just yet. Instead, he stepped back outside, letting the hot air clear his head. The new padlock felt heavy in his hand as he looked back at the unit. He'd have to make some decisions about what to do with everything inside, but right now, all he could think about was the family who had sought refuge here and where they might be sleeping tonight. Jack stood at the entrance of Unit 23B, his calloused hand shielding his weathered eyes from the harsh afternoon glare bouncing off the corrugated metal door. The storage facility stretched out behind him in neat rows, a maze of identical units baking under the relentless sun. The manager's office had been quick and impersonal, just a gruff exchange of crumpled 20s and a curt reminder about keeping up with monthly payments. No questions asked, no sympathy offered. Now, facing the padlocked door that held whatever remained of Uncle Roy's life, Jack felt an odd reluctance settling in his chest like a stone. The key felt foreign in his palm, old brass worn smooth by years of handling. It fought him at first, the lock mechanism stubborn with rust and neglect. Jack jiggled it gently, then with more force, until it finally surrendered with a rusty groan that seemed to echo his own weariness. He grabbed the metal handle at the bottom of the roll-up door with both hands and pulled upward. The corrugated steel protested with a screech that set his teeth on edge and announced his presence to anyone within a quarter mile. The musty smell rushed out to greet him first, that unmistakable cocktail of dust motes, decomposing cardboard, and the particular staleness that comes from air left too long undisturbed. Jack blinked rapidly as his eyes struggled to adjust from the bright parking lot to the dim cavern before him. When the shadows finally took shape, his breath caught in his throat like a fishhook. This wasn't just an abandoned storage unit filled with forgotten belongings. Someone had transformed this 10 by 12 concrete box into something that broke his heart. Someone had made this their home. A thin mattress lay pushed against the left wall, its surface carefully made up with threadbare blankets that had once been bright blue but now faded to the color of winter sky. The corners were tucked with military precision, as if order could somehow make up for the complete lack of comfort. Cardboard boxes had been ingeniously arranged to create makeshift furniture. A small table fashioned from a sturdy carton, what looked like a child's desk created by stacking smaller boxes just so. The engineering was simple but thoughtful, speaking of someone who understood how to make the best of impossible circumstances. But it was the artwork that truly stopped Jack cold. Crayon drawings were carefully taped to the metal walls with what looked like medical tape. Bright splashes of primary colors fighting against the institutional gray of the storage unit. They showed stick figures holding hands under cotton ball clouds, houses with crooked chimneys sending up spirals of smoke, suns with faces and arms stretched wide in welcome. A child's vision of home, of family, of all the things that should be simple and guaranteed but somehow weren't. "Dear God," Jack whispered, the words barely audible in the confined space. His heart felt heavy as an anvil in his chest. He stepped carefully over the threshold, his work boots silent on the concrete floor. Every instinct told him he was trespassing on something sacred, something private. This wasn't just storage. This was someone's entire world. A small backpack sat next to the mattress like a faithful guardian, its fabric faded from what had once been bright red to a dusty rust color. Superhero patches decorated its surface. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, their bold colors now muted with age and wear. A stuffed elephant, gray with accumulated love and missing one button eye, kept watch from atop a stack of boxes. Its remaining eye seemed to follow Jack's movements with patient wisdom. Jack moved deeper into the unit with the careful reverence of someone walking through a church. His eyes cataloged details that painted an increasingly heartbreaking picture. Empty juice boxes stacked in a neat pile near what served as a kitchen area. A child's jacket hung on a bent nail driven into the wall, its sleeve suggesting someone no bigger than a first grader. Well-worn sneakers, maybe size 6 or 7, were tucked precisely under the edge of the mattress, ready to be stepped into at a moment's notice. Everything was tidy, organized with the kind of careful precision that spoke of trying to create order in the midst of complete chaos. Someone had worked hard to make this concrete box feel like home, to give a child some sense of stability in a world that had clearly failed them both. Near the back wall, metal shelving units held what must have been Uncle Roy's actual belongings, old mechanic's tools still bearing traces of motor oil, fishing gear that smelled faintly of lake water and better times, cardboard boxes labeled in Roy's familiar messy scrawl, army stuff, photos, keep forever. Jack was about to turn away, overwhelmed by the weight of discovery, when something caught his peripheral vision. UMA, a manila envelope wedged between two boxes like it was hiding. He approached the shelving unit and carefully extracted the envelope, noting how the paper had yellowed around the edges like autumn leaves. His hands, steady enough to thread a bolt in poor light, trembled slightly as he worked the clasp open. Inside was a single photograph, its corners worn soft from what must have been countless moments of handling. Jack lifted it toward the rectangle of light streaming in from the open door. A little boy smiled back at him from the glossy surface, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with unruly dark hair that stuck up in cowlicks no amount of water could tame. The child sat on a park swing, captured mid-laugh, his small hands gripping the chains like he was flying toward pure joy. But it was the eyes that made Jack's chest tighten until he could barely breathe. Dark eyes that crinkled at the corners exactly the way his own did when he smiled, which admittedly hadn't been often in recent years. Something about that smile, those familiar eyes, that stubborn hair pattern made the world feel like it was tilting sideways. With mounting dread, Jack flipped the photograph over with hands that had started to shake in earnest. There, in neat feminine handwriting that he recognized like a punch to the gut, were words that made his knees go weak. "Mommy says you're my daddy. I hope I get to meet you someday. Love, Tommy." Jack staggered backward, his shoulder blades hitting the metal shelving with a clang that echoed through the unit like a bell. His mind raced through calculations, memories, possibilities. A child? How could there be a child? He'd never. But even as his thoughts tumbled over each other in desperate denial, old memories surfaced like bodies rising from a lake. Rachel Morrison, that intense summer romance before his marriage to Sarah, her tear-stained face in his truck that last day, as she told him to never contact her again, that she was moving away and wanted a clean break. That had been 6 years ago. 6 years. And if this boy was 5 now? A soft scuffling sound broke through his spiral of panicked thoughts like a branch snapping. Jack froze, every nerve suddenly electric with alertness. There it was again, the whisper of movement, deliberate and careful, coming from behind a tall stack of boxes in the unit's far corner. "Hello?" Jack called softly, fighting to keep his voice gentle despite the way his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Is someone there?" "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt anyone." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy as summer air before a storm. Jack could hear his own breathing, could almost sense the presence of another person weighing their options in the shadows. Then, slowly, like a wild animal emerging from cover, a small figure stepped out from behind the makeshift wall of boxes. A little boy, probably around 5 years old, stood watching Jack with eyes that were impossibly familiar. Dark, serious, and filled with a gravity no child should have to carry. His hair was exactly like the boy's in the photograph, though his clothes were different now. A faded t-shirt and jeans that had been carefully mended at the knees. Clean but obviously well worn. The boy's small fingers worried the hem of his shirt as he studied Jack's face with the intensity of someone much older. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly in the confined space. Each word was carefully chosen, filled with equal parts desperate hope and bone-deep fear. "Are you my daddy?" The question hung in the air between them like a bridge. Neither of them knew how to cross, while outside the storage unit, the world continued spinning as if everything hadn't just changed forever. Jack's fingers trembled as they held the photograph. A soft scuffing sound made him freeze. There, in the shadows behind a tower of boxes, stood a small figure. The boy emerged slowly, tentatively, into the light streaming through the storage unit's entrance. He was thin, wearing clean but well-worn clothes, jeans a size too big held up by a belt, and a red t-shirt that had faded to pink. His sneakers were scuffed but carefully tied. Dark curls framed a face that made Jack's heart skip. The same face from the photograph, the same eyes that seemed to hold both wisdom and innocence. "Are you my daddy?" The boy's voice was barely above a whisper, hopeful yet cautious. Jack carefully lowered himself to one knee, trying to appear less intimidating. His throat felt tight. What's your name, buddy?" "Noah." The boy took a small step forward. "Noah Reynolds. Mommy said you'd find me someday." His hands fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. "She showed me your picture lots of times." Jack's mind raced. Reynolds? He didn't know anyone by that name. He'd never seen this child before today, yet something about those eyes, that particular curve of his smile. "Where is your mommy now, Noah?" Noah's lower lip trembled slightly. "She had to go away. She said to wait here, that you'd come." He pointed to the mattress in the corner. "I've been real careful, sir. I keep everything neat, like Mommy taught me." Jack noticed now how methodically the small space was organized, clothes folded in a milk crate, books stacked by size, even the crayon drawings arranged in neat rows on the wall. His heart ached. "How long have you been here by yourself?" Noah's forehead wrinkled in concentration. "Since the leaves started falling." He brightened slightly. "But Mr. Roy checked on me lots before he got sick. He brought me sandwiches and juice boxes." Uncle Roy? Of course, he must have known about Noah, must have been helping him. But now Roy was gone, and this child had been here alone for— Jack's stomach clenched. Months, through the whole fall and into winter. "Are you hungry, Noah?" Jack asked gently. Noah nodded, then quickly added, "But I still have some crackers left. I'm being careful with them, like Mommy said." Jack glanced at his watch. The sun was already starting to set, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. He couldn't leave this child here another night, regardless of who he was or wasn't. But what was he supposed to do? "How would you like to come home with me tonight, Noah? We can get some dinner and figure things out in the morning." The words came out before Jack could second-guess them. Noah's eyes widened. "Really? To your house?" He took another step forward, then hesitated. "Can I bring Trumpet?" "Trumpet?" Noah darted to the mattress and returned with the one-eyed elephant. "He helps me be brave." Jack felt something crack inside his chest. "Of course, Trumpet can come." He stood slowly. "Do you have a coat? It's getting cold out." Noah nodded eagerly and retrieved a small backpack and a worn denim jacket. He moved with the careful efficiency of someone used to packing up quickly, tucking Trumpet safely inside the bag. "Ready?" Jack asked. Noah walked over and, without hesitation, slipped his small hand into Jack's. His palm was warm and trusting. "Ready, Daddy?" Jack's breath caught at the word, but he didn't correct him. Instead, he guided Noah out of the unit, locked up, and led him to his truck. The boy needed help getting into the passenger seat. He was small for his age, Jack noticed, and carefully buckled himself in, placing his backpack on his lap. The drive home was quiet. In the growing darkness, Noah pressed his face against the window, watching the city lights with wonder. Every few minutes, Jack glanced over, still struggling to process the reality of this situation. The child seemed so at ease with him, so certain of who he was. But how was this possible? When they pulled into the driveway of his modest two-story home, Noah's eyes grew wide. "Is this where you live?" "Yes. And my daughter Ellie lives here too. She's 15. Jack helped Noah out of the truck. She might be a little surprised to see you." That turned out to be an understatement. When Jack opened the front door, Ellie was sprawled on the living room couch with her phone, exactly where she usually was at this hour. She looked up, probably to deliver her usual sarcastic greeting, but the words died on her lips. She stared at Noah, who stood in the doorway clutching his backpack. Noah stared back, then offered a shy wave. "Dad?" Ellie's voice cracked slightly. "Why is there a little kid in our living room?" The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting warm patches of light across the worn linoleum floor. Ellie stood at the stove, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, flipping golden brown pancakes with practiced ease. The sweet aroma of butter and maple syrup filled the small kitchen. Noah sat at the kitchen table, his feet dangling from the chair, watching Ellie with wide-eyed fascination. He'd borrowed one of Ellie's old t-shirts to sleep in, and it hung like a dress on his tiny frame. "Do you like Mickey Mouse shapes?" Ellie asked, trying to keep her voice light and cheerful despite the uncertainty hanging in the air. Noah nodded eagerly. My mommy used to make faces with chocolate chips. In the living room, Jack paced back and forth, his cell phone pressed to his ear. His free hand rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd never managed to break. Yes, I understand, he said into the phone. No, I haven't seen anyone matching that description. He paused, listening. Right, if you hear anything about a woman looking for her son, please call me immediately. He ended the call and added another shelter to his growing list of dead ends. 3 calls, 3 shelters, and no leads. Breakfast is ready, Ellie called out, placing a plate stacked with pancakes in the center of the table. Jack walked into the kitchen, tucking his phone into his pocket. The sight before him made his heart twist. Noah perched on a stack of old phone books so he could reach the table properly. Ellie carefully cutting his pancakes into bite-sized pieces. It looked so normal. Too normal. Thank you, Ellie, Noah said politely, carefully picking up his fork. Jack sat down heavily in his chair. That's very nice manners, buddy. Noah beamed at the praise. Mommy says good manners make you a hero, like you. Jack nearly choked on his coffee. Like me? Uh-huh. Noah's face lit up with excitement. Mommy told me lots of stories about you. How you help people fix their cars when they're stuck, and how you gave your jacket to a homeless man one time, and how you always smell like motor oil 'cause you work so hard. Jack and Ellie exchanged worried glances. They weren't just generic stories. They were specific details about Jack's life. He had given his jacket to a homeless man last winter, and he did often come home smelling like motor oil from his part-time mechanic work. Noah, Jack said gently, can you tell me your mommy's name? The little boy's face scrunched up in concentration as he chewed his pancake. Mommy is just Mommy, but sometimes her friends call her Tash. Ellie leaned forward, her breakfast forgotten. What does your mommy look like? She's pretty, Noah said simply, and her hair is in lots of tiny braids. She smells like flowers 'cause she works at the perfume store. Jack made a mental note of these details, though they didn't ring any bells. He couldn't recall anyone matching that description from his past. Daddy, Noah said suddenly, making Jack's heart skip a beat. Can I show Ellie my drawing? Before Jack could correct the daddy part, Noah had already scrambled down from his chair and retrieved his backpack. From the living room, he pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and proudly presented it to Ellie. It's beautiful, Ellie said, genuine warmth in her voice as she studied the crayon drawing. Is that you and your mom? And Daddy? Noah added, pointing to a tall stick figure with spiky brown hair. See? He has tools, 'cause he fixes things. Jack felt a lump forming in his throat. Someone had been telling this child stories about him, creating a fantasy father figure. But why? And who? The sharp rap of knuckles on the front door made them all jump. Jack's stomach dropped as he caught sight of a woman in a dark blazer through the window, her ID badge visible even from a distance. Stay here with Noah, he told Ellie, who nodded and immediately engaged the boy in conversation about his drawing. Jack opened the door to find exactly what he'd feared. A Child Protective Services agent, her expression professionally neutral but her posture tense. Mr. Harmon, I'm Sandra Martinez from CPS. We received a concerning call from the manager at Safe Storage about a child possibly living in one of their units. Jack stepped onto the front porch, partially closing the door behind him. Yes, I found him yesterday evening. I've been calling shelters all morning trying to locate his mother. You should have contacted the authorities immediately, Sandra said, though her tone wasn't unkind. Can you tell me exactly how you found him? Jack explained everything. The inherited storage unit, the photograph, Noah's appearance, and the strange stories he seemed to know about Jack's life. Sandra took notes, her frown deepening with each detail. Mr. Harmon, while I appreciate that you were trying to help, keeping an unknown child overnight without reporting it is a serious matter. I know, Jack said, running a hand through his hair. He was scared and tired. I couldn't bring myself to hand him over to strangers in the dark. Please, just give me a little more time to find his mother. He clearly knows me somehow, even if I don't understand why. Sandra studied him for a long moment. From inside, they could hear Noah's bright laugh mingling with Ellie's voice as they presumably continued to discuss his artwork. The boy seems comfortable here? She asked. Very. He's bonded with my daughter already. Listen, I know this is irregular, but something tells me his mother left him there knowing I'd find him. If you could just give me a few days to track her down, Sandra sighed, glancing at her watch. I can give you 48 hours to locate the mother. After that, we'll need to place him in emergency foster care while we investigate. I'll need to interview Noah and check the house, and you'll have to fill out temporary guardian paperwork." "Thank you," Jack said, relief flooding through him. "I promise I'll find her." The next 2 days would be crucial, and Jack had no idea where to start. But as he led Sandra into the house, where Noah's face lit up at the sight of him, he knew he had to try. Somewhere out there, a mother had trusted him with her son. Now he just had to figure out why. The CPS agent, Miss Martinez, sat stiffly on their worn couch, her navy blazer crisp despite the early hour. Her pen scratched against her notepad as she looked up at Jack with stern brown eyes. 48 hours, Mr. Harmon. That's all I can give you before I have to place him in temporary care." She glanced at Noah, who was still happily munching on pancakes at the kitchen table. "And I'm being generous here." Jack ran a hand through his graying hair. "I understand. Thank you." After the agent left, Ellie paced the living room. "Dad, we need a plan. Like, now." "I know, sweetheart." Jack watched Noah carefully folding his paper napkin into a triangle. The boy seemed so at peace, as if he'd always belonged at their table. "We'll start with hospitals. His mother might be looking for him." "I'll come with you," Ellie said, already grabbing her jacket. "Noah can tell us if he recognizes anything." They loaded into Jack's old pickup truck, Noah securely buckled between them. The first hospital, Street Mary's, was a dead end. The second, County General, yielded nothing but sympathetic looks from the staff. By late afternoon, they pulled into Memorial Hospital's parking lot. Noah had dozed off, his head resting against Ellie's arm. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room waiting area made everyone look sickly. "Third time's the charm?" Ellie whispered, careful not to wake Noah. Jack approached the front desk, where a nurse with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair looked up from her computer. Her name tag read, Jeanette Alvarez. "My name's Jack Harmon," he began, his voice tired. "I'm looking for information about a woman who might be here, her son." He gestured to Noah, still sleeping in Ellie's arms. Nurse Alvarez's eyes widened with recognition. "The little boy with the Superman backpack, always drawing pictures?" Jack's heart jumped. "Yes, you know him?" "Of course I do. He and his mother were here almost every day for the past few months. She worked at the coffee cart in the lobby until—" The nurse's expression darkened. "Are you family?" "It's complicated," Jack admitted. "Noah showed up in my storage unit yesterday. He thinks I'm his father, but I've never met his mother." Ellie stepped forward, adjusting Noah's weight in her arms. "Please, we just want to make sure his mom's okay. He needs her." Nurse Alvarez studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Follow me." They walked through maze-like corridors, their footsteps echoing against the sterile walls. Noah stirred but didn't wake, his small hand clutching Ellie's shirt. "Latasha, that's his mother's name. She would sit in the chapel during her breaks," Nurse Alvarez explained as they walked. "She'd write letters. To you, I think." She looked at Jack. She'd talk about Noah's father, how he'd find them someday. "I thought she was just." The nurse trailed off diplomatically. Jack felt a familiar ache in his chest. Where is she now? They turned down another hallway, this one quieter than the others. Nurse Alvarez stopped in front of room 412. She should be. The nurse pushed open the door, revealing an empty bed, sheets pulled tight and pristine. "I don't understand," Nurse Alvarez muttered, checking her tablet. Her face fell as she read something on the screen. "Oh no. What happened?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "There was an accident last night, a hit and run near the hospital." The nurse's voice was gentle but professional. "Latasha was crossing the street after her shift. She's in intensive care now. They took her into emergency surgery this morning." Ellie gasped softly, hugging Noah closer. The little boy slept on, unaware that his whole world hung in the balance. The nurse touched Jack's arm. "Mr. Harmon, that little boy has been through so much. His mother, she's fighting hard. But," she squared her shoulders, "the ICU is on the 6th floor. I can't take you up there, but I can make sure the staff knows you're Noah's emergency contact, at least until we sort this out." Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He looked at his daughter holding Noah, at the empty hospital room, at the nurse's compassionate face. Somewhere in this building, a young mother was fighting for her life, and her son, this bright, trusting little boy, had found his way to Jack's doorstep, believing he was his father. "Thank you," he managed finally. "Please, let us know if there's any change." Nurse Alvarez's eyes softened. "Of course." And Mr. Harmon? Those letters she wrote? They're in her personal effects. Maybe they'll help explain things. They stood there in the doorway of the empty room, the hospital's distant sounds washing over them like waves. Noah sighed in his sleep, and Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. Whatever came next, this little boy needed them, and somewhere 6 floors above, his mother needed them too. The intensive care unit hummed with the quiet beeping of machines and hushed voices of nurses. Jack stood at the window of room 412, his heart heavy as he looked at the woman lying motionless in the hospital bed. Latasha Reynolds was smaller than he'd imagined, her delicate frame seeming even more fragile against the stark white sheets. Tubes and wires connected her to various monitors, and bandages wrapped around her head. She's been unconscious since the surgery, the nurse explained softly. Her name tag read, Helen. The impact from the hit and run caused severe trauma. We're monitoring her closely. Ellie squeezed her father's arm. She'd insisted on coming along while their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, watched Noah. Is that really Noah's mom? She whispered. Jack nodded, unable to find words. Through the window, he could see the gentle rise and fall of Latasha's chest, the only sign of life in her still form. Her dark skin looked ashen under the harsh hospital lights, and her long braids were carefully arranged on the pillow by some caring nurse. Her personal belongings are in the closet, Helen said, gesturing to a small storage area in the corner of the room. You might find something helpful there. Contact information for family members, perhaps? Jack hesitated. It felt wrong to go through someone's private things, but Noah needed him to find answers. With a deep breath, he entered the room. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence as he carefully opened the closet door. A worn backpack sat on the bottom shelf. Jack recognized it from the storage unit. His hands trembled slightly as he unzipped it, feeling like an intruder in someone's private world. Inside, he found a small photo album, some clothes folded with careful precision, and a bundle of envelopes tied together with a faded ribbon. His breath caught as he saw his own name written in neat handwriting on the top envelope. Dad, Ellie whispered from the doorway. Look at this. She held up a small notebook she'd found in a side pocket. It's like a diary or something. Jack gently took the bundle of letters and the notebook, his throat tight. He glanced at Latasha's still form, silently apologizing for the invasion of privacy. But Noah needed answers, and time was running out. We should head home, he said quietly. Noah will be wondering where we are. The drive home was silent, the bundle of letters sitting heavily in Jack's jacket pocket. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, but Jack barely noticed, his mind racing with questions. They found Noah curled up on their couch, clutching the stuffed elephant he'd brought from the storage unit. Mrs. Peterson had already left, leaving a note about how sweet and well-behaved the boy had been. Ellie sat beside him, and Noah instinctively snuggled closer to her in his sleep. Jack watched them for a moment, struck by how natural it looked. His teenage daughter protectively curved around this little boy, who'd stumbled into their lives less than 2 days ago. He pulled out the bundle of letters with trembling hands and settled into his old armchair. The first envelope was dated 3 years ago. Jack carefully opened it, trying not to tear the worn paper. The handwriting inside was neat but showed signs of emotion in its slight unevenness. Dear Mr. Harmon, you won't remember me, but I remember you. 5 years ago, you volunteered at the Hope Street Church outreach program. I was one of the people you helped. You fixed my car when I couldn't afford repairs, and you didn't just fix it. You showed kindness. You talked to me like a person, not a charity case. You shared stories about your daughter and how you were raising her alone. You even gave me your card and said to call if I ever needed help again. I lost that card, but I never forgot your kindness. I never forgot how you told me about your faith in God and how He brings light even in the darkest times. I'm writing this letter, though I'll probably never send it, because I want you to know that your kindness mattered. It gave me hope when I had none. I have a son now. His name is Noah. He's not your son. I know you might worry about that. But sometimes, when things get really hard, I tell him stories about you, about the kind man who helped his mommy once and showed her that good people still exist. In Noah's mind, you've become something of a hero, a father figure he's never had. I know it's not fair to put that on you, which is why I've never sent these letters. But I keep writing them because somehow it helps to imagine there's still someone out there who would care. The letter continued, but Jack's vision blurred with tears. He looked up at Noah, peaceful in sleep, and remembered that day at Hope Street Church. He'd volunteered there for years before his wife left. Before, he'd withdrawn from everything and everyone. He stood quietly and moved closer to the couch. Kneeling beside Noah, he gently brushed a curl from the boy's forehead. "I don't know if I'm your daddy," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "but I promise I won't leave you." Noah stirred slightly, snuggling closer to Ellie, but didn't wake. In the dim evening light, Jack could see traces of Latasha in the boy's features. The same gentle expression, the same resilient spirit that somehow shone through even in sleep. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as something sacred, something healing. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the worn wooden table where Jack and Ellie sat. The familiar scent of coffee filled the air, mixed with the sweet aroma of maple syrup from the half-eaten toast on their plates. Jack wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, gathering courage for the conversation ahead. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm going to apply for temporary guardianship of Noah." Ellie looked up from her phone, her eyes widening. For a moment, she said nothing, and Jack's stomach tightened with uncertainty. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. "Really?" she asked, sitting up straighter. "You mean it?" Jack nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "His mom's going to be in the hospital for a while. He needs somewhere stable to stay, and—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Well, he's already here." "Dad," Ellie said, pushing her plate aside and leaning forward. "Have you noticed how different everything feels since he came? Like, the house doesn't seem so empty anymore?" Jack glanced toward the living room where Noah was sprawled on the carpet, completely absorbed in drawing with the crayons Ellie had found in her old art supplies. The boy hummed softly to himself, his small face scrunched in concentration. "I know what you mean," Jack admitted. "It's like we were missing something we didn't even know we needed." Ellie finished for him. She fidgeted with her fork, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. "Remember how quiet it used to be? Just us eating dinner, barely talking?" Jack remembered all too well. After her mother left, Ellie had retreated into herself, and he hadn't known how to bridge that gap. But now, with Noah here, dinner had become a lively affair filled with the boy's endless questions and Ellie's patient answers. "Noah asked me to read him a story last night," Ellie continued, her voice softer. "He fell asleep holding my hand. Dad, I've never had anyone look up to me like that before." Jack reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. "You're amazing with him, Elle." "So are you," she said, squeezing back. "I see how you check on him at night and how you always make sure he has the blue cup he likes." "The courthouse opens at 9, Jack said, checking his watch. "I called yesterday. We need to be there by 10 for the emergency hearing." "I'm coming with you," Ellie declared, standing up. "Noah needs both of us there." An hour later, they sat in the county courthouse's waiting area. The hard wooden benches were uncomfortable, and the air felt thick with anxiety. Noah sat between them, swinging his legs and clutching the stuffed elephant Ellie had given him. "Mr. Harmon?" A clerk called his name, and Jack's heart jumped. "Judge Fulton will see you now." The courtroom was smaller than Jack expected, but no less intimidating. Judge Raymond Fulton, a distinguished man in his 60s with steel gray hair, peered at them over his reading glasses. "This is quite an unusual situation, Mr. Harmon," the judge said, reviewing the papers before him. "You're requesting temporary guardianship of a child you met just 3 days ago?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jack replied, standing straighter. "Noah's mother is in intensive care, and there are no other family members available." "And you have no biological connection to this child?" "No, sir, but—" "Mr. Harmon," Judge Fulton interrupted, removing his glasses, "what makes you think you're qualified to care for this boy? Your financial records show irregular income from handyman work, and there's a note here about missed mortgage payments last year." Jack felt his face flush. "I've caught up on those payments, Your Honor. I work hard, and I have a good home. My daughter—" "Your 15-year-old daughter?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "Who would watch the child while you work?" Ellie stood up suddenly. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Fulton considered her for a moment, then nodded. "Noah needs us," she said, her voice clear despite her nervousness. "He's already lost so much, and now his mom is sick. We're not perfect, but we care about him. My dad, he works really hard, and he's the most loving person I know, and I can help with Noah after school. We already have a routine." Noah looked up at Ellie, then at Jack, his small hand reaching for Jack's larger one. The simple gesture wasn't lost on the judge, whose expression softened slightly. "The child appears comfortable with you," Judge Fulton noted. He shuffled through more papers. I have the hospital report here. The mother's condition is serious, but stable. She's expected to need several weeks of recovery. Jack held Noah's hand tighter. We just want to give him a safe place while his mother heals. Judge Fulton leaned back in his chair, studying them. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, he spoke. I'm granting temporary custody for 30 days. He held up a hand as Jack started to thank him. This is conditional on a positive CPS review. They'll need to inspect your home and evaluate the living situation. If the mother recovers before the 30 days are up, we'll reassess immediately. He signed the papers with a flourish. Mr. Harmon, I hope you understand the responsibility you're taking on. This isn't a decision to be made lightly. I understand, Your Honor, Jack said solemnly. Thank you. As they left the courtroom, Noah tugged on Jack's sleeve. Can we go home now? Home. The word hung in the air, full of promise and uncertainty. Jack lifted Noah into his arms, feeling the boy's small head rest trustingly against his shoulder. Yeah, buddy, he said softly. We're going home. The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor hummed quietly as Jack made his way to the ICU. His work boots felt heavy against the polished floor, each step echoing his uncertainty. In his calloused hands, he held the bundle of worn letters they'd found in Latasha's belongings. Nurse Jeanette Alvarez stood at her station, reviewing charts. She looked up as Jack approached, her kind face softening with recognition. Mr. Harmon, good morning. How is she? Jack asked, his voice rough with concern. Still unconscious, but her vitals are stable. Nurse Alvarez's dark eyes settled on the letters in his hands. Are those? Jack nodded, extending them toward her. I was hoping. Could you read these to her when she wakes up? They're letters she wrote but never sent. To me. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. The nurse took the letters carefully, as if handling precious artifacts. Of course. Sometimes patients can hear us even when they're unconscious. Would you like to sit with her for a while? Jack hesitated, then nodded. Nurse Alvarez led him to Latasha's room, the steady beeping of monitors creating a rhythmic backdrop to their footsteps. Latasha lay still, her dark skin a stark contrast against the white hospital sheets. Various tubes and wires connected her to machines that tracked her life signs. She looked younger in sleep, vulnerable in a way that made Jack's chest ache. I'll give you some privacy, Nurse Alvarez said softly, stepping out and pulling the privacy curtain. Jack stood awkwardly for a moment before settling into the chair beside the bed. The plastic creaked under his weight. He stared at his rough hands, searching for words. I'm sorry, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, I didn't know you needed help, that you were living in that storage unit with your boy. He swallowed hard. Noah's safe. He's with me and my daughter Ellie. She's good with him, better than I am, really. The monitors beeped steadily. Outside, a cart wheeled past and voices drifted through the door. I don't know why you chose me, Jack continued. Those letters, you wrote about seeing me at that church outreach program years ago. Said I helped fix your car one time, wouldn't take payment when you couldn't afford it. He rubbed his face. I don't even remember, but you trusted me enough to tell Noah I was his daddy. Tears pricked at his eyes. I'm not the hero you made me out to be in those stories. I'm just trying to get by. Failed at my marriage, barely keeping it together with Ellie. His voice grew, thick. But I promise you, I'll keep Noah safe until you're better. And after, too, if you'll let me help. A nurse passed by, checking vitals on her tablet. Jack fell silent until she left. Your boy, he's something special. Got this way of looking right into your soul, you know? And his laugh, it fills up all the empty spaces in a room. Jack smiled slightly. You did good with him, real good. He's polite and kind and brave. Must get that from you. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, creating patterns on the floor. Jack stood, his joints protesting the long sit in the uncomfortable chair. I should get back to them, but I'll bring Noah to visit when you're stronger. Nurse Alvarez has my number if anything changes. He hesitated, then gently patted Latasha's hand. Get better. Your boy needs you. And maybe we all need each other a little bit. Back at the nurse's station, Jack handed Nurse Alvarez a piece of paper with his contact information. Her warm smile reassured him somehow. I'll call if there's any change, she promised, and I'll read these to her. Sometimes the voices of loved ones help guide patients back. I'm not. Jack started to protest that he wasn't a loved one, but stopped. What were they to each other? Strangers connected by a child's trust and a mother's desperate hope. The drive home took longer than usual, rush hour traffic clogging the streets. Jack's mind wandered to the bills piling up at home, the extra mouth to feed, the uncertainty of it all. But when he pulled into his driveway, the worry lifted slightly at the sight of light spilling from his living room windows. Inside, he found Ellie and Noah sprawled on the floor, surrounded by art supplies. They'd spread newspaper across the carpet, and both wore old t-shirts splattered with paint. Noah's tongue stuck out in concentration as he worked on his masterpiece. "Daddy Jack!" Noah called out, jumping up to show him a painting. "Look, I made our family." Jack's breath caught as he studied the childish artwork. 3 figures stood holding hands, a tall one with brown hair, a medium one with yellow hair, and a small one with curly black hair. Above them, a yellow sun smiled down on what looked like their house. "That's you," Noah pointed to the tall figure. "And that's Ellie. And that's me." His small finger jabbed at each figure in turn. "And I made one for Mommy too, so she can see us when she wakes up." Ellie looked up from her own painting, her face softening at Jack's expression. Paint streaked her cheek, and her usual teenage cynicism had melted away, replaced by something gentler. "Noah's been teaching me his technique," she said, showing her own abstract swirls of color. "He says art needs to come from your heart, not your head." "Smart kid," Jack managed, his voice rough. He sank into his old armchair, watching them return to their artwork. Noah hummed while he painted, a tuneless little song that seemed to float in the air like dust motes in the sunlight. Ellie added careful details to her painting, occasionally asking Noah's opinion, which he gave with solemn consideration. The scene before him felt like a photograph he'd seen once in a magazine, the kind of perfect family moment he'd stopped believing in years ago. But here it was, happening in his own living room. Paint stains on the newspaper, his daughter's rare smile, a little boy's trust, and the warm golden light of evening wrapping around them all like a blanket. For the first time since his wife left, since his life had crumbled into something barely held together, Jack felt the scattered pieces of his heart clicking back into place. It wasn't perfect. There were still bills to pay, a mother in the hospital, and no guarantees about tomorrow. But right now, in this moment, they were whole. Noah looked up from his painting and caught Jack's eye, giving him a smile that could light up the darkest corners of any soul. "Want to paint too, Daddy?" "Jack?" "Yeah," Jack said softly, sliding down to join them on the floor. "Yeah, I think I do." The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the driveway as Jack steadied a small blue bicycle. Noah sat perched on the seat, his hands gripping the handlebars so tight his knuckles were white. His Spider-Man helmet wobbled slightly on his head, still a bit too big despite being adjusted to its smallest setting. "Ready, buddy?" Jack asked, keeping one hand on the bike's seat and the other on the handlebar. Noah's bottom lip trembled. "What if I fall?" "Then we'll get back up and try again," Jack said softly. "That's what brave boys do." "I'm brave," Noah whispered, more to himself than to Jack. "That's right. Now, remember what we practiced? Keep your feet on the pedals and look straight ahead." From the front porch, Ellie recorded the moment on her phone, trying to hide her grin as Noah's face switched between determination and fear. "You've got this, little man," she called out. Jack jogged alongside the bike, holding it steady as Noah began to pedal. The training wheels had come off yesterday, and now it was just Noah, finding his balance with Jack's helping hand. "I'm doing it." Noah squealed as they picked up speed. "You sure are." Jack couldn't help but laugh at the pure joy in the boy's voice. "Ready for me to let go?" Noah's eyes widened. "No, don't let go." "Just for a second," Jack promised. "You won't even notice." They made it halfway down the driveway when Jack slowly released his grip. Noah wobbled for a moment, but kept going, pedaling with newfound confidence. He made it almost 10 feet before the bike started to tip. Jack was there in an instant, catching both Noah and the bike before they hit the ground. "Got you." Noah's heart was racing, but he was beaming. "Can we do it again?" They spent the next hour practicing, each attempt lasting a little longer than the last. By the time the streetlights came on, Noah could make it to the end of the driveway on his own. Later that evening, Ellie sat cross-legged on the living room floor with Noah, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. She drew careful lines on her sketch pad while Noah watched, fascinated. "See how I make the elephant's trunk curve?" she demonstrated. "It's like drawing the letter SIZ, but bigger and wider." Noah's tongue stuck out slightly as he concentrated on copying her movement. His elephant looked more like a lumpy dog with a garden hose for a nose, but Ellie praised it like it belonged in a museum. "That's amazing, Noah. Look at how you got the ears just right." She pointed to the flappy circles he'd drawn. Want to learn how to draw a giraffe next? Noah nodded eagerly, already reaching for a fresh sheet of paper. Jack watched them from the kitchen as he prepared dinner, amazed at how naturally Ellie had taken to being a big sister. The walls of their refrigerator were already covered with Noah's artwork, each piece signed with a wobbly Noah in different colored crayons. The neck goes up, 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 Ellie explained, making exaggerated stretching motions with her hands, like it's trying to reach the clouds. Noah giggled. Do giraffes eat clouds? No, silly. They eat leaves from the tallest trees. Oh, Noah considered this. Can we get a giraffe? I don't think it would fit in our backyard, Ellie laughed. But maybe we can go see some at the zoo sometime? Noah's eyes lit up. He turned to Jack. Can we, please? Jack smiled, stirring the pot of mac and cheese. We'll see, buddy. Maybe this weekend if the weather's nice. After dinner, they piled onto Noah's bed for story time. It had become their nightly ritual, each person taking turns adding to a made-up story. Tonight's tale involved a purple penguin who wanted to become a race car driver. And then, Noah said, bouncing slightly, the penguin found magic roller skates. The roller skates were covered in glitter, Ellie added, and they made whoever wore them go super fast. Jack stroked his chin thoughtfully. So the penguin put on the magical roller skates and zoomed around the racetrack so fast that his feathers turned rainbow-colored. Noah clapped his hands in delight. And he won the race. He sure did, Jack agreed, pulling the covers up to Noah's chin. And now it's time for this little race car driver to get some sleep. One more story? Noah pleaded, giving them his best puppy dog eyes. Not tonight, champ. Jack smoothed down Noah's curls. You've had a big day with all that bike riding. Ellie leaned down to kiss Noah's forehead. Sweet dreams, little brother. She caught herself after she said it, shooting a quick glance at Jack, but he just smiled softly. As Ellie left the room, Noah reached out and caught Jack's hand. His small fingers wrapped around Jack's thumb, just like he did every night before bed. It was their special moment, a quiet connection that made Jack's heart ache with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Like it here, Noah said quietly, his eyes already heavy with sleep. Can we stay forever? Jack's throat tightened. He looked at this small boy who had somehow worked his way so completely into their hearts in such a short time. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with hope and possibilities that Jack wasn't sure he could promise. He managed a smile, but there was sadness in it as he searched for the right words to answer Noah's innocent question. Jack stood at his kitchen counter, staring at the half-empty coffee pot while Ellie and Noah giggled over breakfast. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Noah had managed to get more syrup on his chin than in his mouth, but his joy was infectious. The phone rang, cutting through their peaceful morning routine. Jack reached for it, his hand hesitating for just a moment before answering. Mr. Harmon? A professional voice came through the line. This is Nurse Martinez from County General. I'm calling about Latasha Reynolds. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He turned away from the table, lowering his voice. Yes? Is everything okay? She's awake, Mr. Harmon. She's been asking about her son. The words hit him like a physical force. He gripped the counter to steady himself. How? How is she? Stable, but weak. She's requesting to see Noah, but we think it would be best if you came first. She remembers you from before. Jack glanced back at the breakfast table. Noah was showing Ellie how to make a smiley face with syrup on his pancakes. I'll be there as soon as I can. After hanging up, Jack took a deep breath and turned to face his daughter. Ellie, can you watch Noah for a bit? I need to go to the hospital. Ellie's eyes widened with understanding, but she kept her voice casual for Noah's sake. Sure, Dad. We can finish our art project from yesterday, right, Noah? Noah nodded enthusiastically, syrup dripping from his chin. We're making a dinosaur. 20 minutes later, Jack walked through the sterile hospital corridors, his work boots squeaking against the polished floor. The familiar antiseptic smell brought back memories of his own wife's hospital stays, but he pushed those thoughts aside. Nurse Martinez met him outside room 412. She was a kind-faced woman with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She's very weak, Mr. Harmon. Please keep the visit brief. Jack nodded, his throat tight. When he entered the room, the beeping of monitors filled the silence. Latasha lay propped up slightly on white pillows, her dark skin a stark contrast against the hospital sheets. Her eyes were open, watching him approach. Jack? Her voice was barely above a whisper. It really is you. He moved closer, settling into the chair beside her bed. Hey, Latasha, it's been a long time. She managed a weak smile. the church food bank. You used to slip extra bread into my bag when you thought no one was looking. Jack felt his cheeks warm at the memory. You had a baby on the way. Seemed like the right thing to do. Latasha's eyes filled with tears. Noah, is he okay? They told me you've been taking care of him. He's great, Jack assured her quickly. He's safe and healthy. Ellie, my daughter, she adores him. He's been drawing pictures, learning to ride a bike. He pulled out his phone, showing her recent photos of Noah playing in the backyard, painting with Ellie, and sleeping peacefully on the couch. Latasha touched the screen gently with trembling fingers. He looks so happy. Her voice cracked. I never wanted to leave him in that storage unit, but after the accident, I was so scared they'd take him away. I remembered you from the church. How kind you were. I thought maybe. Hey, Jack said softly, you did what you had to do to protect him. And you were right about me. I've been trying my best to keep him safe. She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. I wrote you so many letters, trying to explain, trying to ask for help, but I could never send them. I found them, Jack said, in your bag. The nurse read some to you while you were unconscious. Latasha opened her eyes again, studying his face. You're different than I remember. Sadder, maybe. Jack shifted in his chair. Life's been complicated, but Noah, he's brought something back. Something I thought I'd lost. A small smile touched Latasha's lips. He has that effect on people. Can I see him, please? Before Jack could answer, Dr. Peterson entered the room. He was a tall man with salt and pepper, hair, and wire-rimmed glasses. Miss Reynolds, you need rest. Your body's been through significant trauma. But my son, Latasha protested weakly. Tomorrow, the doctor said firmly but kindly, let's get you through one more night of observation and rest. Then we can talk about visitors. Jack stood, understanding it was time to go. I'll bring him first thing in the morning. I promise. He hesitated, then added, he's going to be so happy to see you. Latasha reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her weakness. Thank you, Jack, for everything. As Jack walked back to his truck, the morning sun had climbed higher in the sky. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, thinking about the woman in the hospital bed who had trusted him with her most precious possession. He thought about Noah's smile, about Ellie's newfound happiness, about the way their broken little family had somehow started to heal. The drive home felt different somehow, like the world had shifted slightly on its axis, reminding him that sometimes the most unexpected turns in life could lead to the most beautiful destinations. When he walked through his front door, he found Noah and Ellie sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by paint and paper. A half-finished dinosaur with wobbly legs and a surprisingly detailed face looked up from their artwork. Daddy, Noah called out, his face lighting up. Look what we made. Jack's heart squeezed at the word daddy, knowing tomorrow would bring changes none of them were quite ready for. But for now, he just smiled and knelt down beside them. It's amazing, buddy. The best dinosaur I've ever seen. The hospital corridor seemed longer than usual as Jack held Noah's small hand. The boy clutched a colorful drawing in his other hand, the paper slightly crumpled from his tight grip. Ellie walked beside them, her presence steady and reassuring. Remember what we talked about, buddy? Jack asked softly, stopping near Latasha's room. Your mommy's still getting better, so she might look a little tired. Noah nodded, his dark curls bouncing. I made her a special picture to help her feel better. He held up the drawing of what appeared to be 3 stick figures standing in front of a house, the sun beaming down on them with a huge smile. A nurse appeared at the doorway, her face kind. She's ready for visitors. She bent down to Noah's level. Your mama's been asking for you, sweetheart. Jack gently guided Noah into the room. The morning light filtered through thin curtains, casting a soft glow on Latasha's face. Despite the bandages and tubes, her eyes lit up the moment she saw her son. My baby, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Tears immediately began rolling down her cheeks. Noah hesitated for just a moment, then ran to her bedside. Mommy! His small hands reached for her, careful of the tubes, just as Jack had warned him. Latasha wrapped her arms around Noah, pulling him close despite her obvious pain. She buried her face in his curls, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. I missed you so much, baby. So much. Jack and Ellie hung back near the door, giving mother and son their moment. Ellie reached for her father's hand, squeezing it tight. Look what I made you. Noah pulled back just enough to show Latasha his drawing. See? That's you, and me, and Jack, and Ellie too. We're all happy because you're getting better. Latasha took the drawing with trembling hands, studying every crayon mark. It's beautiful, Noah. She looked up at Jack, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. Thank you. Thank you for taking care of my boy. Jack shifted uncomfortably under her grateful gaze. Anyone would have done the same. No, Latasha said firmly, though her voice was weak. Not anyone. I remembered you from the church shelter, you know. 3 years ago. She stroked Noah's hair as she spoke. You fixed the heater in the middle of winter, stayed late to make sure everyone would be warm enough. The memory slowly surfaced in Jack's mind. A particularly cold night, the ancient heating system groaning in protest. He hadn't thought anyone would remember such a small thing. You were kind, Latasha continued. Treated everyone with respect. That's why she paused, gathering strength. That's why I wrote those letters. Why I told Noah about you. I knew if anything happened to me, you'd be good to him. Noah climbed carefully onto the edge of the hospital bed, curling up against his mother's side. Jack makes good pancakes, Mommy. And Ellie teaches me painting. Latasha smiled through her tears. Does she now? Ellie stepped forward, her usual teenage awkwardness replaced by genuine warmth. He's really good at it. Getting better than me, actually. Thank you, Latasha said to Ellie, for being so good to him. They stayed for an hour, Noah chattering about everything he'd done, showing his mother the Band-Aid on his knee from learning to ride a bike, telling her about the bedtime stories. Latasha listened with rapt attention, never letting go of her son's hand, drinking in every word. When the nurse finally came to tell them visiting hours were ending, Noah's lower lip trembled. I don't want to go. I know, baby. Latasha kissed his forehead. But I need to rest so I can get stronger. Then we can be together all the time, okay? Noah nodded bravely, though tears spilled down his cheeks. Promise? I promise. Latasha looked at Jack. Would it be okay? Could you bring him back tomorrow? Of course, Jack said without hesitation. Anytime you want. The drive home was quiet. Noah falling asleep in his car seat, exhausted from the emotional visit. Ellie sat in the front, staring out the window, lost in thought. Later that evening, after Noah was tucked into bed, Jack found Ellie in the kitchen. She was absently stirring a mug of hot chocolate, her face troubled. You okay? Jack asked, pulling out a chair beside her. She seems really nice, Ellie said softly. Latasha, you can tell she loves him so much. She paused, her spoon clinking against the mug. We're going to lose him soon, aren't we? Jack looked down at his hands, rough from years of work, remembering how small Noah's fingers felt in his. The house seemed to grow quieter, the weight of Ellie's question hanging in the air between them. He couldn't find the words to answer. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting warm patches on the wooden table where Latasha sat, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of chamomile tea, still bearing the fading marks of hospital bracelets on her wrist. Jack watched from the counter as she took small, careful sips. The doctor says you're making good progress, he said, pulling out a chair to join her. Latasha nodded, her eyes bright despite her tired features. Better every day, though I still can't believe all this. She gestured around the cozy kitchen. Your kindness. Taking in Noah. Everything. From the living room came the sound of children's laughter. Noah and Ellie were sprawled on the carpet, surrounded by colored markers and paper. The teenage girl had taken to showing Noah how to draw animals, and his artistic attempts, while messy, brought smiles to everyone's faces. Look, Mommy. Noah bounded into the kitchen, holding up his latest masterpiece. Ellie showed me how to make elephants. Latasha's face lit up. That's beautiful, baby. She reached out to touch the drawing, her movements still careful and measured. You're becoming quite the artist. Ellie appeared in the doorway, her usual teenage defensiveness softened by genuine affection. He's got talent, she said, way better than I was at his age. Jack felt a warmth spread through his chest, watching them interact. These afternoon visits had become precious moments of healing, not just for Latasha's physical recovery, but for all of them. Later that evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Jack found Latasha sitting quietly in the living room. Ellie had retreated to her room to finish homework, leaving them alone. Sometimes I think God has a sense of humor, Latasha said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. All those years ago at the church shelter, you were the only one who treated me like a person, not a project. And now here we are. Jack settled into the armchair across from her. I barely did anything back then, just carried some boxes, fixed a few things. You showed kindness without expecting anything in return. Latasha's voice carried a weight of memory. Do you know how rare that is? The clock ticked softly on the wall as Jack considered her words. After Sarah left, he said, referring to his ex-wife, "I lost faith in a lot of things, including myself. Thought maybe I wasn't meant for family life. But look at you now." Latasha gestured to the drawings on the refrigerator, the toys neatly stacked in the corner. "You've given Noah exactly what he needed, what we both needed." "We all needed it," Jack admitted. "This house was just empty before. Ellie was drifting away from me. I was just going through the motions." They shared stories as the evening deepened, about faith lost and found, about mistakes and regrets, about the strange ways life could surprise you. Latasha spoke of her struggles with homelessness, of protecting Noah, of never losing hope despite everything. Jack talked about his failed marriage, his distance from God, and how a mysterious inheritance had changed everything. The next afternoon, Ellie surprised everyone by baking cookies. The kitchen filled with the warm scent of vanilla and chocolate as she showed Noah how to properly space the dough on the baking sheet. "My mom used to bake," Latasha said quietly to Jack as they watched from the doorway. "Before everything fell apart, I always wanted to learn, but it's never too late," Jack replied. "Ellie's become quite the baker. She could teach you too." Latasha's eyes welled with tears. "You've all been so good to us. I don't know how to repay." "Don't," Jack interrupted gently. "That's not what this is about." Days passed, and Latasha's strength gradually returned. She began taking short walks around the yard, often with Jack beside her for support. During one such walk, she stopped to admire the small garden Ellie had started. "I've been praying again," she confessed. "For the first time in years, being here, seeing how God brought us to this place. It's hard not to believe in miracles." Jack understood. He'd found himself doing the same, though he hadn't told anyone yet. Watching Noah and Ellie bond, seeing Latasha heal, feeling his home come alive again, it all seemed touched by something greater than chance. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks, Jack helped Latasha out onto the front porch. She'd been feeling stronger, but still needed assistance with steps. His hand supported her elbow as she carefully lowered herself into one of the old wooden chairs. "Beautiful evening," she said, looking out at the quiet street. "It is," Jack agreed, settling into the chair beside her. Their hands found each other's naturally, without thought or hesitation. It wasn't romantic. There was too much healing still needed for that. But in that moment of connection, they both felt something profound. Understanding, trust, the possibility of new beginnings. They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, watching the sky transform from orange to purple to the deep blue of early evening. Inside, they could hear Ellie and Noah's muffled laughter as they played one of their made-up games. The sound drifted out to the porch like a gentle reminder of all the unexpected gifts life could bring. The doorbell rang just as Jack was helping Noah button up his dinosaur pajamas. The 5-year-old giggled as Jack pretended to nibble his tummy, making growling noises that matched the T-Rex on his PJs. Who could that be at this hour? Ellie called from the kitchen, where she was cleaning up after their spaghetti dinner. Latasha, who had been resting on the couch, sat up straighter, her face showing concern. Jack ruffled Noah's hair. "Stay here, buddy. Let me check." Through the front window, Jack spotted 2 people standing on his porch, a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard and a police officer. His stomach dropped. He'd seen enough CPS visits in his life to recognize one. Opening the door, Jack maintained a calm demeanor despite his racing heart. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Harmon?" The woman adjusted her glasses. "I'm Sandra Martinez from Child Protective Services, and this is Officer Thompson. We need to speak with you regarding some serious allegations." Jack's throat went dry. "Of course, please come in." As they entered the living room, Latasha struggled to stand, but Jack gestured for her to stay seated. Ellie appeared in the doorway, her dish towel still in hand. "We received a concerning report from one of your neighbors, Miss." Martinez began, her voice professional but stern. "They've observed unusual activity, specifically an unrelated minor child and a single woman living in your home without proper documentation or apparent oversight." Jack's face flushed with anger, but he kept his voice steady. "Noah is here under temporary guardianship granted by Judge Peterson. His mother, Latasha, is recovering from a serious accident. Everything is documented." "May I see those documents, Miss?" Martinez asked. While Jack retrieved the paperwork from his office, he could hear Noah's little feet padding down the hallway, despite being told to stay put. "Daddy?" Noah's small voice carried across the room. "Why are there police here?" Officer Thompson's hand instinctively moved to rest on his belt, causing Jack's heart to skip a beat. It's okay, Noah. These people just need to ask some questions. Miss Martinez reviewed the guardianship papers, her frown deepening. These are temporary orders, Mr. Harmon, and according to our records, there have been no home studies or background checks performed. The neighbor also expressed concerns about inappropriate relationships. Inappropriate? Latasha spoke up, her voice trembling with indignation. Jack has been nothing but a blessing to us. He's given us shelter when we had nowhere else to go. Ma'am, please understand, we have to investigate all reports, Miss Martinez said, especially when they involve potential exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Jack felt his chest tighten. Exploitation? I'm trying to help a child and his mother get back on their feet. What exactly are you implying? The report suggested racial motivations might be at play. Officer Thompson interjected, his tone making Jack's blood boil. Ellie stepped forward, her voice shaking. That's ridiculous. Noah is family to us. We love him. Nevertheless, Miss Cloting, Martinez continued, given the severity of the allegations and the lack of proper vetting, we'll need to temporarily remove Noah until a full investigation can be completed. No, Noah ran to Jack, wrapping his arms around his legs. I want to stay with Daddy. Latasha tried to stand again, tears streaming down her face. Please, you can't take him. Jack is the only person I trust with my son. Ma'am, you're currently not in a position to make custody decisions, Miss Martinez stated firmly. Your medical condition and housing situation make you temporarily unfit. Jack knelt down to Noah's level, fighting to keep his voice steady. Noah, buddy, look at me. These people need to make sure you're safe. It's just for a little while. But I am safe. Noah's bottom lip quivered. You promised you wouldn't leave me. Officer Thompson stepped forward. We need to move this along. Miss Martinez pulled out some forms. Mr. Harmon, please sign these acknowledging temporary surrender of custody. Jack's hand shook as he signed the papers, each stroke of the pen feeling like a betrayal. Ellie had run to Noah's room to pack a small bag, returning with his favorite stuffed elephant and some clothes. Time to go, Noah, Miss Martinez said, reaching for his hand. Noah backed away, clinging to Jack's shirt. No, please. I'll be good. I promise. Jack felt his heart shattering as Officer Thompson moved to separate them. Noah's small fingers clutched desperately at Jack's clothes. Don't let them take me, Daddy! Noah screamed, his voice raw with fear and confusion. Daddy, please! Jack couldn't hold back his tears as Noah was carried away, his little arms reaching out, face red and streaked with tears. The door closed behind them, but Noah's screams still echoed through the house. Jack's legs gave out, and he crumpled to the floor. Ellie rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders as he sobbed. Latasha covered her face with her hands, her body shaking with grief. I promised him, Jack choked out between sobs. I promised I wouldn't let him go. The empty house seemed to mock them with its silence, broken only by their shared weeping and the lingering echoes of Noah's desperate pleas. The house felt like a tomb. Every creak of the floorboards echoed through empty rooms that, just hours ago, had rung with Noah's laughter. Jack sat on the front porch, his calloused hands trembling as they held Noah's last drawing, a crayon masterpiece of 4 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. My family was scrawled across the top in wobbly letters. Behind him, a door slammed. The sound made him flinch. Ellie had been in her room since the social workers left, her muffled sobs carrying through the thin walls. He wanted to comfort her, but what could he say? He'd failed. Failed to protect the little boy who trusted him. Failed his daughter, who'd finally opened her heart again. The screen door creaked, and soft footsteps approached. Latasha emerged, her hospital bag clutched tight against her chest. Her face was drawn, eyes red-rimmed from crying. I should go, she whispered, her voice rough. This is all my fault, if I hadn't. Don't, Jack interrupted, his own voice barely holding steady. Please don't blame yourself. But it's true. Latasha sank onto the step beside him, careful to maintain distance. If I hadn't left him in that storage unit, if I'd found another way. Her shoulders shook. I brought this chaos into your lives. Jack stared at the drawing in his hands. You brought hope into our lives, he corrected softly. Noah did that. You did that. A car drove by slowly, and both of them tensed, remembering how the neighbor had watched them earlier, phone in hand, judgment in her eyes. The same neighbor who'd called CPS with her concerns about their unusual living arrangement. I keep hearing him crying, Latasha admitted, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. When they took him away, she couldn't finish the sentence. Jack closed his eyes, but it didn't help. He could still see Noah reaching for him, tears streaming down his small face, screaming, "Daddy," over and over. The social workers had been professional but firm, explaining that allegations required immediate action. They'd promised Noah would be safe, comfortable, but the terror in the boy's eyes told a different story. Inside, another door slammed. Ellie's music started blasting angry, pulsing beats that made the windows rattle. "She's hurting," Latasha observed quietly. "We all are." Jack carefully folded Noah's drawing and tucked it into his shirt pocket close to his heart. She finally let herself care again after her mother left. Noah helped heal something in her. In all of us, Latasha added. She stood slowly, still unsteady from her hospital stay. "I should find a shelter, give you space to—" "No." Jack's voice was firm. "You're still recovering, and we're going to fight this together." Latasha's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why would you want to after all this trouble?" "Because it's right," Jack said simply. "Because Noah deserves better than fear and prejudice tearing apart the only stability he's known." A sob escaped Latasha's throat, and she pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle it. Jack wanted to reach for her, to offer comfort, but everything felt fragile, like one wrong move might shatter what remained. The music upstairs suddenly cut off. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, and Ellie appeared in the doorway, her face tear-stained but determined. "I'm calling Pastor Michael," she announced. "He'll know what to do. He has to." Before either adult could respond, she'd grabbed her phone and disappeared into the kitchen. Her voice drifted out, broken but insistent. "Pastor, it's Ellie. They took Noah. Please help us." Jack stood, his joints protesting. "I should go see him," he said. "Maybe he can. I don't know. Make sense of this somehow." Latasha nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'll check on Ellie." The drive to the church was a blur. Jack found himself in Pastor Michael's office without really remembering how he got there. The pastor's familiar face was creased with concern as Jack sank into the worn leather chair across from his desk. "Ellie called?" Pastor Michael said gently. "She told me what happened." Jack stared at his hands. They still felt empty without Noah's small fingers clutching them. "I don't understand," he whispered. "We were helping him, loving him. How can that be wrong?" "It's not wrong, Jack. Not in God's eyes." "Then why?" Jack's voice cracked. He pulled out Noah's drawing, now crumpled from being pressed against his heart. "Why does trying to do the right thing hurt so much?" Pastor Michael leaned forward, his eyes full of compassion. "Redemption is never smooth, Jack. It wasn't smooth for Joseph when his brothers sold him into slavery. It wasn't smooth for Ruth when she left everything to follow Naomi. And it wasn't smooth for Christ on the cross. But Noah's just a child," Jack protested. "He's innocent in all this." "Yes, he is," Pastor Michael agreed. "And that's exactly why this fight matters. That's exactly why God put him in your path." The truth of those words settled heavy in Jack's chest, mixing with the ache that had taken root there since watching Noah being driven away. He smoothed out the drawing on the pastor's desk. 4 figures, holding hands, united under a bright sun. A family, his family. Ellie sat cross-legged on her bed, her laptop balanced precariously on a pillow. The soft glow from her desk lamp cast shadows on the walls as she stared at the blank document before her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. "Someone has to tell the truth," she whispered to herself, wiping away fresh tears with the sleeve of her oversized sweatshirt. She began typing, "Dear editor, my name is Ellie Harmon. I'm 15 years old, and I want to tell you about my little brother Noah." She paused, considering the word brother. It felt right, even if it wasn't technically true. The words started flowing faster now, her fingers racing to keep up with her thoughts. 3 weeks ago, my dad found a little boy in an old storage unit. That might sound strange, but what happened next was beautiful. Noah became part of our family. He filled our house with laughter and love. He made my dad smile again for the first time since Mom left. He made me remember what it feels like to have someone look up to you. Ellie reached for the stack of photos on her nightstand. She'd taken dozens with her phone over the past weeks. Noah and her dad reading bedtime stories, Noah showing off his first bike ride, the 3 of them covered in pancake batter one Sunday morning. She attached them to the email, her hands steady now. Noah's mom, Latasha, was in the hospital after an accident. She trusted my dad to take care of Noah because she remembered his kindness from years ago. When she got better, she didn't try to take Noah away. Instead, we all started becoming something more, a real family. She pulled Noah's drawings from her desk drawer. The crayon masterpieces showed their evolving family. First 3 stick figures, then 4, all holding hands under bright suns and rainbow skies. She carefully photographed each one. But yesterday, someone decided our family was wrong. They called Child Protective Services because they didn't like seeing a white man caring for a black child. They didn't bother to learn our story. They didn't see how Noah's face lit up when Dad taught him to ride a bike, or how Latasha and I spent hours painting together while Noah told us stories about dragons and superheroes. Tears splashed onto her keyboard. Ellie wiped them away, determined to finish. The social workers came and took Noah away. They didn't care that he was happy and safe. They didn't listen when he screamed for my dad, his dad. They just saw what they wanted to see. She added quotes from Noah's time with them. Can we stay forever? And I love you, Daddy. And Ellie, you're the best big sister ever. Each memory felt like a precious gem she was sharing with the world. Noah isn't just some case number. He's a little boy who loves dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets and can't sleep without his blue teddy bear. He's the kid who helped me paint clouds on my bedroom ceiling and who always saves the red gummy bears for Dad because they're his favorite. Ellie included a photo of Latasha's first dinner at their house. Everyone crowded around the kitchen table, faces glowing with happiness. She remembered how Noah had insisted on sitting between her and Dad, while Latasha watched them all with grateful tears in her eyes. Our family might not look like other families, but love doesn't care about that. Noah taught us that. He showed us how to be brave enough to open our hearts again. She attached the final photo, the one she'd taken just yesterday morning, before everything fell apart. Noah was sitting on Dad's shoulders, both of them laughing, as Latasha and Ellie made funny faces at them. Please help us tell our story. Help us bring Noah home. Help people understand that family isn't about matching skin colors or having the same blood. It's about love, trust, and choosing each other every day. Ellie signed her name and added her phone number and email address. Her finger hovered over the send button as doubt crept in. What if no one cared? What if this made things worse? Then she remembered Noah's face as they took him away. His small hands reaching for Dad, his tears, his confusion. She hit send. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a link to the newspaper's website. There it was, front and center. Love knows no bounds, a teenager's plea for her brother. They had published every word, every photo. By lunchtime, the story had been shared thousands of times. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications as people from across the country responded to the article. Support poured in through social media. This is what real family looks like. Number Bring Noah Home. Love makes a family. Standing with the Harmons. Who do we call? How can we help? Local news stations picked up the story. National blogs shared it. People began changing their profile pictures to a photo of Noah's family drawing. Ellie sat on her bed, overwhelmed by the response. Her inbox filled with messages from other families, sharing similar stories, offering legal help, sending prayers and support. The hashtag number Bring Noah Home trended on social media. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Dad stood in the doorway, his eyes red but hopeful. Ellie? He said softly, holding up his phone with the article displayed. Did you do this? She nodded, suddenly uncertain. Are you mad? Instead of answering, he crossed the room and pulled her into a tight hug. You're amazing, he whispered into her hair. Thank you for fighting for our family. Her phone buzzed again. Another message of support, another share, another voice joining the chorus demanding justice and understanding. The truth of their story was spreading, carried on waves of compassion and hope, reaching people who understood that love didn't fit into neat categories or conventional boxes. Ellie held onto her dad, both of them drawing strength from each other and from the knowledge that they weren't alone anymore. Their private pain had become a public call for change, and thousands of strangers were answering that call with open hearts and raised voices. The evening air was crisp as people gathered on the church lawn, their faces illuminated by flickering candlelight. Pastor Devine stood at the top of the stone steps, his weathered face solemn as he watched the crowd grow larger by the minute. What had started as a small prayer meeting had turned into something much bigger. Jack sat on a wooden bench near the church entrance, his shoulders hunched. Ellie squeezed his hand, her other hand holding a white candle that dripped wax onto the concrete. Latasha sat beside them in her wheelchair, still recovering but determined to be there. I can't believe how many people came, Ellie whispered, her eyes wide as she watched more cars pull into the parking lot. The crowd was a beautiful mix of faces, young and old, different colors and backgrounds. Many held handmade signs with messages like, "Love makes a family," and "Bring Noah home." Some signs had photos of Noah's bright smile, taken from Ellie's newspaper article that had touched so many hearts. "Your words did this, sweetheart," Jack said softly, pulling his daughter closer. "You help people see the truth." Pastor Devine stepped up to the microphone that had been set up. His voice carried across the lawn, warm and steady. "Tonight, we gather not just as a church, but as a community. We're here because a little boy named Noah showed us what family really means." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Someone started singing Amazing Grace, and others joined in, their voices rising into the darkening sky. Mrs. Chen from the corner grocery store was there, holding a sign covered in children's handprints made by her kindergarten Sunday school class. Next to her stood Mr. Rodriguez, who had closed his auto repair shop early to attend. Even Jack's grumpy neighbor, Mr. Peterson, who had initially been suspicious of Noah, stood quietly with a candle. "Look," Ellie nudged her father, pointing toward the street. News vans were pulling up, their cameras already rolling. Reporters moved through the crowd, interviewing people who had been touched by Noah's story. A young reporter approached their bench. "Mr. Harmon, would you like to share your thoughts about Noah?" Jack hesitated, but Latasha reached over and touched his arm. "Tell them," she said softly. "Tell them about our boy." Jack stood slowly, his voice shaky at first, but growing stronger. "Noah came into our lives unexpectedly, but he filled a hole we didn't even know we had. He's not just some case number. He's a little boy who needs his family, all of us." The reporter's eyes softened as she took notes. Behind her, more people were arriving, parking their cars along the street and joining the vigil. Some brought food, setting up tables with cookies and hot chocolate. Children ran around with paper hearts they'd decorated, adding them to a growing wall of support on the church notice board. Pastor Devine's phone buzzed in his pocket. After checking it, he hurried over to Jack, his face bright with hope. "The CPS director is watching the news coverage. She's on her way here." Latasha gripped the arms of her wheelchair. "Really?" "Yes," Pastor Devine smiled. "Sometimes it takes a village to move a mountain." The next 30 minutes felt like hours. More songs were sung, more prayers offered. People shared stories about Noah, the grocery store clerk who remembered how he always said please and thank you, the librarian who spoke about his love for dinosaur books, the ice cream shop owner who recalled his infectious laugh. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The crowd parted as Miss Martinez, the CPS director, stepped out. Her face was serious as she made her way toward Jack and Latasha. The singing quieted, and hundreds of eyes watched her approach. She stopped in front of them, looking around at the sea of candlelight, at the signs, and the faces full of hope and determination. For a long moment, she was silent. "Mr. Harmon," she finally said, her professional tone softening, "I've reviewed the footage from your neighbor's security camera that was submitted to our office. It clearly shows nothing inappropriate occurred. Additionally, the outpouring of community support and character testimonials we've received is unprecedented." Jack held his breath. Ellie gripped his hand tighter. "I've decided to reopen Noah's case for immediate review," Miss Martinez continued. "Given the circumstances and the overwhelming evidence of a stable, loving environment, I believe we can expedite this process." A cheer went up from the crowd. Latasha covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with relief. Ellie threw her arms around her father's neck, nearly dropping her candle. Pastor Devine stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Would you like to join us, Miss Martinez? We have plenty of candles to share." Miss Martinez looked around at the hopeful faces, at the signs and the prayers and the love that had brought everyone together. A small smile crossed her face as she accepted a candle from a nearby child. The flames flickered in the gentle breeze, hundreds of tiny lights representing hundreds of hearts united for one small boy. Above them, stars began to peek through the darkening sky, as if heaven itself was joining the vigil for Noah's return home. The courthouse's marble floors echoed with footsteps as Jack, Latasha, and Ellie made their way to courtroom B. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie, the same one he'd worn to church on Sundays. Ellie walked beside him in a neat blue dress, her usual teenage slouch replaced by determined shoulders. Latasha moved carefully, still recovering from her injuries, but her eyes shone with quiet strength. "Whatever happens," Jack whispered to them both, "we're in this together." The courtroom's heavy wooden doors creaked as they entered. Morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Judge Raymond Fulton sat at his bench, his silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the sunlight as he reviewed the papers before him. The room wasn't as empty as they'd expected. Several rows of benches were filled with familiar faces, church members, neighbors, and even Nurse Jeanette from the hospital. Pastor Devine nodded encouragingly from his seat in the front row. "All rise," the bailiff called out. The Honorable Judge Raymond Fulton, presiding in the matter of temporary guardianship for minor child Noah Reynolds. Once everyone was seated, Miss Martinez, the CPS worker who had originally removed Noah, approached the podium. Her face showed signs of strain, but her voice was clear and professional. "Your Honor, the Department of Child Protective Services wishes to formally retract our previous report and recommendation." She paused, adjusting her glasses. "After thorough investigation and review of community testimony, we find no evidence of impropriety or unsafe conditions in either Mr. Harmon's home or in his temporary guardianship arrangement." Judge Fulton leaned forward. "What prompted this reassessment, Miss Martinez?" "Several factors, Your Honor. First, the original complaint was found to be based on prejudicial assumptions rather than fact. Second, our investigation revealed an extraordinary level of community support and character witnesses." She gestured to the filled benches behind her. "And third, the demonstrated positive impact on the child's welfare during his stay with Mr. Harmon and his daughter." Nurse Jeanette was called to testify next. She walked to the stand with quiet dignity, her hospital ID badge still clipped to her sweater. "I've been caring for Miss Reynolds since her admission," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "During that time, I've witnessed Mr. Harmon's dedication to both Noah and his mother. He visited daily, often bringing books to read to Miss Reynolds even when she was unconscious." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "With the court's permission, I'd like to read from one of the letters Miss Reynolds wrote before her accident." Judge Fulton nodded, and Jeanette unfolded the paper carefully. "Dear Jack," she read, "you won't remember me, but 5 years ago, you showed kindness to a scared pregnant woman at the church food bank. You gave me your lunch that day, saying someone else needed it more than you did. You didn't know it then, but that simple act gave me hope when I had none. That's why I knew, if anything happened to me, you were someone I could trust with my son." Latasha wiped tears from her cheeks as the nurse continued reading. Jack stared straight ahead, his jaw tight with emotion. Ellie reached over and squeezed his hand. Pastor Devine testified next, speaking about Jack's character and his transformation since Noah had entered their lives. Then came Ellie's turn. She stood tall at the podium, her voice clear despite her nervousness. "Your Honor, before Noah came, our house was just a place where we lived. Dad worked all the time, and I stayed in my room. We barely talked." She took a deep breath. "But Noah changed everything. He made us laugh again. He made us a family. And not just us. He brought Miss Reynolds into our lives too. She's become like..." Ellie glanced at Latasha, who gave her an encouraging nod, "Like the mother I needed." Judge Fulton removed his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. "Miss Reynolds, would you like to address the court?" Latasha rose slowly, steadying herself on the table. "Yes. Your Honor, I made a choice to trust Jack Harmon with my son's life. Watching how he and Ellie have cared for Noah, seeing how they've opened their hearts and home to us both, it proved that trust was well placed." Her voice grew stronger. "They're not just people who helped us in a crisis. They've become our family." The judge turned to Jack. "Mr. Harmon, do you have anything to add?" Jack stood, his hands steady now. "Your Honor, I'm just a mechanic who tries to fix things. When I found Noah in that storage unit, something broke inside me in a good way. All the walls I'd built up since my divorce, all the fear of caring too much, it just crumbled." He looked at Noah, who sat with a court assistant in the front row. "I'm not asking to replace anyone. I'm just asking to be part of his life, part of their lives, in whatever way is best for Noah." Judge Fulton took a moment to review his notes, the courtroom silent, except for the soft whir of the ceiling fan. Finally, he looked up, his expression thoughtful but resolved. The law's primary concern in these cases is the welfare of the child. Sometimes that's a straightforward matter of finding the most stable home environment. But sometimes, as in this case, it's about recognizing that family can be both born and chosen. He straightened his papers. "I'm ruling that full custody be returned to Miss Reynolds as Noah's biological mother and legal guardian." Noah ran to his mother, who gathered him in her arms despite her still healing injuries. But Judge Fulton wasn't finished. However, he continued, given the extraordinary circumstances and the clear benefits of the child, I'm also ruling that Mr. Harmon may be designated as Noah's godfather and long-term guardian, provided Miss Reynolds agrees. This would give him legal standing to remain involved in Noah's life and provide support to Miss Reynolds in raising him. The evening sun painted long shadows across Jack's living room as they sat together, emotionally drained but relieved after the day's events in court. The familiar scent of jasmine drifted through the open windows, carried by a gentle breeze that stirred the curtains. Ellie had made her special chamomile tea, and 3 steaming mugs sat on the coffee table, wisps of steam dancing in the golden light. Latasha sat in Jack's old armchair, her hands wrapped around her warm mug. She looked different now, stronger, more settled, even though her injuries were still healing. The bruises from the accident had faded to yellowish marks, like watercolor paintings on her skin. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Latasha began, her voice soft but steady. She glanced at the family photos on the wall, new ones now, showing Noah's bright smile alongside Jack and Ellie. About Noah, about our future. Jack leaned forward on the couch, his weathered hands clasped together. The day's tie hung loose around his neck, forgotten in the emotional aftermath of the hearing. Whatever you need, Latasha, you know that. I do know that. She smiled, taking a careful sip of tea. That's exactly why I've made this decision. She set her mug down and looked directly at Jack. I want you to help me raise Noah officially as his co-guardian. The words hung in the air for a moment. Ellie, who had been curled up in the corner of the couch, straightened suddenly. You mean Jack? Started? His voice catching. I mean, I want to make this permanent, Latasha continued, her eyes growing misty. Noah needs both of us. He needs this family we've somehow created. I've watched how you are with him, Jack, how naturally you step into being exactly what he needs. And Ellie, she turned to the teenager, who was now sitting on the edge of her seat. You've been the big sister he never had, but always needed. Ellie's face crumpled with emotion. She launched herself across the room, wrapping her arms around Latasha in a fierce hug. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her head in Latasha's shoulder. Thank you, she whispered, her voice muffled. Thank you. Latasha held her close, stroking her hair with gentle hands. No, thank you, sweetheart, for opening your heart and your home to us. Jack watched them, his own vision blurring. The last rays of sunlight caught the tears on his cheeks, making them sparkle. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. It's a big step. Latasha nodded, still holding Ellie. I've never been more sure of anything. Noah deserves to have all the love possible in his life. And somehow, through all of this chaos and pain, God brought us together, made us a family. The papers are already drawn up, she continued, reaching for her purse with one hand while keeping her other arm around Ellie. My lawyer helped me prepare everything. Joint legal guardianship, shared decision-making rights, everything official and proper. She pulled out a manila envelope and held it out to Jack. His hands trembled slightly as he took it, opening it carefully to reveal the formal documents inside. You don't have to decide right now, Latasha assured him. Take time to think about it. But Jack was already shaking his head, a smile breaking through his tears. I don't need time. I knew from the moment Noah asked if I was his daddy that I'd do anything to protect him, to be there for him. He looked up at Latasha. Both of you. He moved to the coffee table where Latasha had placed a pen. The papers rustled as he spread them out, his signature flowing across each marked line with purpose and certainty. Each stroke of the pen felt like a promise, a commitment to the unexpected family that had formed in his heart. When he finished, Ellie finally pulled back from Latasha, wiping her eyes. Can we tell Noah now, please? He's out on the porch, looking at stars with his telescope, Jack said, standing up. The one you helped him set up, Ellie. They found Noah sitting cross-legged on the porch, his small telescope pointed at the emerging evening stars. The first crickets of the night were beginning their chorus, and fireflies blinked lazily in the gathering dusk. Jack sat down beside him, feeling the rough wooden boards of the porch beneath him. Noah automatically leaned against him, a gesture so natural now it made Jack's heart swell. Look, Daddy. Noah pointed upward. I found the Big Dipper. Ellie showed me how to find it. Jack wrapped an arm around the boy's small shoulders, pulling him close. Above them, the stars winked into existence one by one, like diamond dust scattered across dark velvet. Noah's warmth against his side felt right, felt like home. We're a team now, Daddy. Noah whispered, still gazing at the stars. The words floated up into the night air, simple and profound, sealing the promise of the signed papers that lay on the coffee table inside. Behind them, through the screen door, Jack could hear Latasha and Ellie's soft conversation, could feel the bonds of their unconventional family strengthening with each passing moment. But right now, in this perfect moment under the stars, he simply held his son close and watched the heavens unfold above them. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Jack hammered the last nail into the newly built shelf unit. The community center's storage room was finally getting the organizing system it desperately needed. Nearby, Ellie arranged donated clothes by size, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Dad, look what Noah made for the bulletin board," Ellie called out, holding up a colorful drawing. The 5-year-old had captured their weekly food drive in his signature crayon-style stick figures with huge smiles, passing out boxes of groceries. Jack stepped back to admire his handiwork and smiled at the drawing. "That's going right in the center spot, kiddo." The door swung open, and Latasha walked in carrying a stack of flyers. Her limp was barely noticeable now, months of physical therapy having worked wonders. "The printer said we can have these at half price if we mention them in our newsletter." "Perfect timing," Jack said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "The new storage system is ready for all those donations you keep bringing in." Latasha's eyes sparkled with pride as she surveyed the room. Gone were the days of cardboard boxes and chaos. Now, neat shelves lined the walls, each section clearly labeled. "Remember when this was just a crazy idea we had over coffee? You mean when Noah kept asking why other kids didn't have warm coats?" Ellie chimed in, taping the drawing to the bulletin board. "And then Mom here wouldn't stop talking about it until we did something?" Latasha laughed, the sound warm and familiar in the small space. "Well, someone had to be persistent." Through the window, they could see Noah playing with other children in the center's small playground. The boy who had once hidden in a storage unit now led games of tag and shared his toys without hesitation. "The social worker called again," Latasha said, sorting through the flyers. "She wants to use our program as a model for other communities. Says we've helped more families in 6 months than most shelters. Due in a year." Jack nodded, remembering how it all started. After the custody hearing, they'd realized their story could help others. Latasha's experience with homelessness, combined with Jack's practical skills and Ellie's social media savvy, had created something special. The community center had become a beacon of hope, offering not just resources but dignity to families in need. "Miss Reynolds, Miss Reynolds," a small voice called from the doorway. Little Maria, one of their regular visitors, came running in with her mother following behind. "I got an A on my math test. The tutoring helped." Latasha knelt down to give the girl a high five. "That's wonderful. See? I told you you could do it." Jack watched as Latasha praised the child, her natural teaching ability shining through. She'd recently started taking online classes to finish her teaching degree, determined to turn her old dream into reality. The afternoon flew by in a blur of activity. Ellie led her teen volunteer group in, organizing the weekend's fundraiser, their enthusiasm filling the center with energy. Jack fixed a wobbly table and helped a father learn basic car maintenance in their small workshop area. Latasha moved between helping with homework and counseling mothers looking for work. "The decorations for tomorrow's fundraiser just arrived," Ellie announced later, carrying in boxes of fairy lights and streamers. "The whole neighborhood's talking about it. Even Mr. Peterson, you know, the grumpy one, he bought 2 tickets. "Well, would you look at that?" Jack said, checking his watch. "Speaking of the fundraiser, we better head home and get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." As they locked up the center, Noah ran to Jack, wrapping his arms around his legs. "Daddy, can we have pancakes for dinner?" "Only if your mom says it's okay," Jack replied, looking at Latasha with a grin. She shook her head with mock exasperation. "You two and your pancakes. What am I going to do with you?" The next evening, the community center glowed with strings of lights. Tables dotted the transformed space, each decorated with flowers donated by the local florist. The smell of good food filled the air as people from all walks of life mingled, sharing stories and laughter. Ellie, wearing a dress she'd picked out specially for the occasion, worked the room like a pro. She introduced donors to families who'd been helped by the program, her natural charm breaking down barriers that might have existed between different social circles. Noah, dressed in his fancy clothes as he called them, proudly showed off his artwork display to anyone who would look. His drawings told the story of their unusual family and the community they'd built through the innocent eyes of a child. Jack stood near the refreshment table, taking it all in. He remembered the lonely man he'd been just months ago, afraid to open his heart. Now, watching Ellie laugh with her friends and Noah charm the crowd, he felt a deep sense of peace. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Latasha appeared beside him, beautiful in a simple blue dress. "Just thinking about how different things were a year ago," he replied. "Who would have thought finding a boy in a storage unit would lead to all this?" The band, made up of local musicians who donated their time, started playing a slow song. The lights seemed to dim on their own, creating a gentle atmosphere. "Dance with me?" Latasha asked, holding out her hand. Jack hesitated for just a moment before taking it. "I'm not very good at this," he warned. "Neither am I," she laughed. "But I think we've proven we're pretty good at figuring things out together." They moved slowly to the music, surrounded by the community they'd helped build. Noah and Ellie were nearby, attempting their own silly dance moves. The room buzzed with conversation and joy, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the clink of glasses. As they swayed to the music, Jack caught glimpses of familiar faces. The nurse from the hospital who'd helped them find Latasha, the pastor who'd offered wisdom during dark times, the neighbors who'd stood by them during the custody battle. Each person represented a thread in the tapestry of their story. Snow drifted lazily past the farmhouse windows, coating the wooden fence posts in a pristine white blanket. Inside, warmth radiated from the crackling fireplace, and the scent of cinnamon and pine filled every corner. Jack stood at the kitchen counter, rolling out cookie dough while 10-year-old Noah perched on a stool nearby, practically vibrating with excitement. "When's Ellie coming home?" Noah asked for what felt like the 100th time that morning. His fingers drummed against the countertop, leaving little flower prints everywhere. Jack checked his watch and smiled. "Any minute now, buddy. The airport shuttle should be dropping her off soon." "I can't wait to show her my report card." Noah bounced on his seat. "And the treehouse you helped me build." "Slow down there," Jack chuckled, ruffling Noah's curly hair. "Let her at least get through the door first." The past 5 years had brought changes that Jack could never have imagined. That day he opened the storage unit door. The little farmhouse, with its creaky stairs and weathered charm, had been a joint decision between him and Latasha. They'd pooled their resources, wanting to give Noah a real home, with a yard to play in and room to grow. The sound of tires crunching on gravel made Noah bolt from his stool. "She's here." Jack barely had time to wipe his hands on a dish towel before Noah yanked the front door open, letting in a blast of cold air. There stood Ellie, her cheeks pink from the cold, overnight bag slung over her shoulder. At 19, she'd grown into a confident young woman, but her eyes still held that same spark of mischief. Noah launched himself at his sister, nearly knocking her backward into the snow. "Whoa there! Squirt!" Ellie laughed, catching Tim in a tight hug. "Miss me much?" Jack stepped onto the porch, wrapping both his children in a warm embrace. "Welcome home, sweetheart." "The place looks amazing, Dad," Ellie said, taking in the twinkling lights strung along the porch railings and the handmade wreath on the door. Very Hallmark movie. Inside, the living room had been transformed into a Christmas wonderland. A tall pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with a mix of store-bought ornaments and handcrafted treasures from Noah's elementary school years. Paper chains and popcorn strings zigzagged across the ceiling, and stockings hung from the mantel, one for each family member, including Latasha's. "Mom's coming for dinner, right?" Ellie asked, settling onto the worn leather couch. She'd started calling Latasha Mom about 2 years ago, a natural progression that had brought tears to everyone's eyes. "She'll be here after her shift at the clinic," Jack confirmed. "She's bringing that sweet potato casserole you love." Noah wedged himself between them, clutching a thick folder. "Look what I made in art class, Elle." He proudly displayed a series of watercolor paintings, each signed with careful attention to detail. "These are incredible," Ellie exclaimed, examining each one. "You're getting really good, buddy. Maybe you'll be a famous artist someday." "Like you?" Noah beamed. Ellie's art major had inspired him to take his own creative talents seriously. The afternoon passed in a warm blur of cookie baking, story sharing, and carol singing. Noah insisted on showing Ellie every new addition to the house, from the reading nook under the stairs to the vegetable garden out back, now dormant under its winter blanket. As dusk approached, Latasha arrived, bringing not only the promised casserole, but also an armful of carefully wrapped presents. Her medical scrubs were hidden under a festive sweater, and her smile lit up the room. "My babies," she said, embracing Ellie and Noah at once. All together, again. They gathered around the old oak dining table, passing dishes and sharing laughs. The farmhouse kitchen, with its exposed beams and rustic charm, seemed to glow with contentment. Jack looked around at his unlikely family, his college daughter home for break, his son who came to him through a miracle, and Latasha, who had become so much more than just Noah's mother. After dinner, they all helped with the dishes, falling into their old routine as if Ellie had never left for college. Noah insisted on making hot chocolate the special way, carefully measuring out the cocoa powder and adding tiny marshmallows in the shape of smiling faces. As evening settled in, they gathered in the living room to open one gift each, their Christmas Eve tradition. Noah could barely contain himself as he handed out carefully wrapped packages to everyone. "Open mine first," he insisted, watching eagerly as each person revealed their gift. For Jack, there was a handmade photo frame decorated with painted tools and hearts. Inside was a picture of all of them at Noah's last birthday party. For Ellie, a set of professional art pencils he'd saved his allowance to buy. And for Latasha, a ceramic jewelry dish he'd made in art class, painted in her favorite colors. When bedtime finally came, Noah protested as always, but his yawns betrayed his exhaustion. Jack followed him upstairs to his room, which still bore traces of the little boy who'd first entered their lives, though now model airplanes and science projects shared space with the stuffed animals. Noah climbed into bed, his eyes heavy but still sparkling with joy. "This is the best Christmas ever," he said, snuggling under his quilted cover. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing back Noah's curls. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his son's forehead, whispering, "Because we found each other." The old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11 as Jack settled into his favorite armchair by the fireplace. The house was finally quiet after a day of Christmas preparations. Ellie had gone up to wrap last-minute presents, and Noah had fallen asleep dreaming of tomorrow's festivities. Through the frost-painted windows, he could see the snow continuing its gentle descent, wrapping their little farmhouse in a peaceful blanket of white. Jack reached for the worn envelope he'd been saving for this moment. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, and the hospital stamp was still visible in the corner. Of all Latasha's letters, this was the only one he hadn't read the last one she'd written before the accident. He'd wanted to wait for the right time, and somehow this Christmas Eve felt perfect. His fingers trembled slightly as he carefully opened the envelope. The handwriting inside was shaky but determined, each word pressed deeply into the paper as if written with great effort. "Dear God," the letter began. Jack's throat tightened. This wasn't just a letter, it was Latasha's prayer. "I don't know if I'll make it through this night. The pain is getting worse, and I'm so scared. Not for me, but for my Noah. He's all I have, all I've ever had that was purely good and beautiful in this world. I know I haven't been the mother he deserves. Living in that storage unit, moving from shelter to shelter, no child should have to live like that." Jack paused, wiping moisture from his eyes. The firelight danced across the paper, making the words seem to flicker with life. "But I remember that day at the church shelter, years ago. That kind man, Jack Harmon, who fixed the broken heater in the middle of winter and wouldn't take any payment. He just smiled and said, 'We take care of each other.' I've held onto that memory like a lifeline. In my darkest moments, it reminded me that good people exist." The words blurred as Jack's eyes welled up. He remembered that day, though he hadn't known its significance until now. It had been just another repair job, one of dozens he'd done for the church's outreach program. "So tonight, Lord, I'm asking for a miracle. Not for me, but for Noah. Lead him to someone who can give him what I couldn't, a stable home, a future, a chance to be a kid without worrying about where he'll sleep or what he'll eat. And if it's not too much to ask, maybe lead him to Jack Harmon. I've told Noah so many stories about him, made him seem like a hero. I know it's just a dream, but sometimes dreams are all we have." Jack had to stop reading for a moment. He could hear Noah's soft snoring from upstairs, peaceful and secure. The boy who'd hidden behind boxes in a storage unit was now sleeping in his own warm bed, surrounded by love. "I don't have much time left to write. The pain is getting worse, and the nurses are coming back. So this is my final prayer. Please protect my boy. Let him know joy. Let him know love. Let him know he was worth every sacrifice, every hard day, every moment of struggle. And someday, let him understand that sometimes the biggest miracles come disguised as ordinary people doing extraordinary things." The letter ended with a shaky signature. Latasha Reynolds, Noah's mom. Jack sat quietly for a long time, holding the letter close to his heart. Through the living room window, he could see the Christmas lights twinkling on their front porch, reflecting off the falling snow. Each tiny light seemed to represent a small miracle that had led them here. Uncle Roy's storage unit, Noah's brave emergence from behind those boxes, Ellie's newspaper article, the community's support, and Latasha's remarkable recovery. From the bookshelf, he retrieved a leather-bound scrapbook labeled How We Became a Family. Inside were photographs, newspaper clippings, Noah's drawings, and all of Latasha's letters except this one. He carefully added the prayer to the final page, smoothing it gently. As he closed the book, his gaze drifted to the window. The farmhouse glowed warmly against the snowy night, its windows casting squares of golden light onto the fresh powder. Like a beacon of love, it stood as testament to the power of compassion, faith, and second chances. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made him turn. It was Latasha, wearing the fuzzy robe Ellie had given her last Christmas. She smiled when she saw the scrapbook in his hands. "I've been looking for that last letter," she said softly, settling onto the arm of his chair. "I wasn't sure I wanted to share it. It was written in such a dark moment." Jack took her hand, his thumb gently rubbing over her wedding ring. "It was written in faith," he corrected, "and look what that faith built." Together, they gazed out at their glowing home, a sanctuary of love that had grown from the simplest acts of kindness, a fixed heater, a storage unit inheritance, and the courage to open their hearts to unexpected miracles. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Harmon, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.